Hello everyone. So I'm going to do a quick video to demonstrate how I might handle tiling old school pixel textures inside of some kind of roguelike dungeon system. And I don't actually work with textures a whole lot, full disclaimer. So, if any of you have any better advice or corrections, go for it. But I think I at least have a handle on the basics, so I'm going to make a tiling brick texture, and then I'm going to apply it to some models that could be used for making a procedural dungeon. I'm going to make them in Blender. So here I've just got a 16 by 16 texture in GIMP. I just clicked new and then chose the aspect ratio. And then I'm not going to worry about making this look especially nice right now. I'm just going to worry about tiling it. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to make sure that the edges of this meet up. So let me see. Let's just try something like this. And, let me think about this. This might take just a moment to get this right. And, oh, now I know. Like I said, I don't do this a whole lot, but, figured I could do it anyway. So, let's try this and see if we get something that tiles appropriately. And what I'm doing is just making sure that that all of the elements meet up on the edges. So hopefully this is going to tile well. So in order to check to see if this is a texture that looks good tiling, go to Filters, Map, and then you can click on Tile here. And one of these tiles is 16 by 16. So let's try a multiple of 16 by 16 to see what this would look like tiled out. Again, that's Filters, Map, Tile. And I'm going to say 256 by 256. Press OK. And here's what this thing looks like all tiled out. So you can see these are meeting up pretty well. Some of them are bigger than others. And, then you can choose to add a whole lot of detail to this. So I'm going to just add a little bit more, but not really go overboard on this. And again, it's just thinking about what's going to be meeting up with what. So let's say we're going to go with some darker gray here, fill in this. And all four of these on the edges meet up, so I'll just fill all of those in with the dark gray. And then, that blue is probably way overboard in the center. So let's actually go with something way more desaturated for between the bricks. And then, as far as making these look a bit better, it's, a lot of it's just working at it and looking at reference images and just picking at a little by little. But one thing that's nice is to think about your light source. So I'm going to say that my light is coming from the top and left. So I'm going to make it's coming from the top and right. So I'm making the top and right of this brighter. I'm selecting this, getting a lighter color. And let's say that the top of this the right of that is brighter. Here's a right side. There's no top or right up here. And let's go ahead and do filters, map tile, same thing. And we can already see that this is looking a whole lot more brick-like. And that was City of Corridors agreeing over there. So now let's add a crack to this. And, you know, this is super low resolution. I'm just checking where the other side of this is, drawing this out. And, like I was just making sure that's the same on both sides. And again, minding the light source. So I'm right-clicking on this, making it a little darker, and saying the bottom, if the top and right is where the light's coming from, the bottom and the left is where our shadows are going to be, right? So, yeah, and that's looking maybe a little too overboard, but let's have a look. Okay, that was way too much. But you get the idea, and you probably want your tiles bigger than 16 by 16 anyway. This is super low resolution. But then let me just add one more detail before I get into Blender. And for this last detail, I'm going to say that the bottom and the right are darker. So then select this and do the bottom and right. So every bottom side and every right side of this gets darker. And let's just take one more look at how this looks. 256. And yeah, that's it's very basic. You know, you'd want to put a lot more work into this. But we're starting to get this brick texture that's feeling all right, tiling okay. So I'm going to save this, go into Blender, and see what we can do with it. So I'm saying export as, and I'm just gonna save in documents for the sake of this brick tile. Export. And now going into Blender. And first I'm going to cover just texturing this cube. So we've got a cube here. And in order to see the textures on here, there's a lot of ways to do this in Blender. But what I like to do is make sure this is in Blender Render up here, and say shading, and make sure that this is on multi-texture and textured solid. Just checks right here. Another way you can do this is go down here and go to texture view. And this doesn't have a texture on it, so we're not seeing anything right now. But textured solid over here gives you better shading, and in my opinion is a lot easier to model while you're looking at it. Of course, all of this is changing in Blender 2.8, so you know, you'll have to learn a little bit different texturing process coming pretty soon. So let me see. So right here, I have the UV image editor open, and you can access that in any window by just clicking here, or here, or here. These are a list of all the different windows that Blender offers. So if you wanted to open it up over here, you'd click here, you'd say UV image editor, and you've got the same thing. So I'm going back to 3D view down here, because I like to be able to see both of them at once. So, the simplest way to do this is just to press, like, select this entire cube, press U, and select unwrap. And you can see there's one big square up here. And what this did was every single one of the faces on this cube is just occupying all of the space on here. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to click Image, Open, and now I'm just going over to that brick tile I made. And you can see, like, this isn't quite tiling right, but just with the corners, but it's kind of close. So, you know, like, the bottom and top are a little tricky because they're going in different directions. But what I can do is I can just select the top, go over here, and you can see I can kind of drag it around. You use the same keys for moving UVs around as you do in the 3D view. So I just press G, and you can see right here it's kind of overlapping too much. So I can just grab this and move it around a little. And you can see already that's lining up better. Though you'd probably want to use a different texture on the top for this, since, you know, it tiles well for the sides, but it doesn't really, the same brick texture doesn't really fit on top too well. And you can also do things like I'm selecting all of these and I'm pressing S for scale. And you can see now this texture is a whole lot bigger on here. Or I could do something like pressing R for rotate, and now all of these are rotating around. Or if I just wanted this one rotated, I could do that too. And, oh yeah, and you can also be more precise with this. So if I pressed R90, it would rotate this 90 degrees. And, let me think what else. Oh, right. So there's also other ways to UV unwrap this. So if I didn't just want all of them laid out in a square like this, but I wanted to make sure that these edges line up better with each other, what I do is I select where the seams are, and that's kind of like peeling this mesh like an orange, or a potato. I forget who posted it in the Discord recently, but someone posted like a little chocolate Santa with a foil wrapper, and when you unwrap it, it's just this square texture, but then, you know, it looks like Santa when it's wrapped around it. Oh, that was Blunder Tommy. And that's basically what you're doing here. So, like, all these areas where there isn't seam, that's going to texture very well. But you want to make sure these seams are somewhere where you won't really be seeing them much. Because, you know, when you're unwrapping with the seam is going to look worse than these continuous areas. So let me see. I think I've done that correctly. So I'm going to press Control E and say Mark Seam. And then I'm selecting all of this. I'm pressing U and I'm saying Unwrap again. And let's look at this. So you can see where these seams are. It didn't look bad before, but you know, it's doing it perfectly there. And our seams are these red lines here. So you can see it's a little dodgier on top here, over here. And again, you can drag this around to fine tune it. Like this side, I'm selecting this. and then pressing G over here, and I can line that up a little better. And you can see the highlights on top here and on bottom here and on top here. So I can say rotate this around, or there we go. And then drag this, line it up. And you can see that's looking a bit better there. And, you know, there's UV unwrapping and texturing is a big area. So there's a lot of tricks you can do to streamline this process and be more effective with it. And if anyone has some advice with this, I encourage you to post about it. So now that we've done, oh, and let me do one final kind of texturing. And I'm going to say Control A, make a cube. I'm going to select everything on here, and then click this for the brick image. So now that we have that applied, I'm going to say U, and this time I'm saying Smart UV Project. And this is a way to get UVs laid out without laying all of the scenes out. But you can see this is Blender just kind of guessing where your seams should be. And again, it's got the advantages and disadvantages of what I was showing with seams. Like these faces on here that are next to each other are going to tile very well together, like these two. And the ones at the edge, you're going to have to mess around with those a little more, like this and this, to get it looking right. So yeah, it's really just a matter of moving around all of your faces on the UV image editor and fine-tuning it until it looks how you want it to look. And like I said, for this brick texture I'm making, you probably want a different texture for the ceiling and floor than you have for the walls. So now, pardon me. I'm going to talk just a little bit about making some tiles you could use in procedural generation of like a simple procedurally generated dungeon. And this again is going to be very basic. So I'm pressing, and let me turn on screen keys if I can. Apologies for not doing this from the start. And do we have screen keys? Sorry about this. It seems screen key isn't working. So I am just going to say Shift A for add and select cube. And you can also do that by going over here, pressing create, and then selecting cube. And now I'm going to move this to the center. I'm pressing Alt-G to do that. You can also affect the position over here in the Transform tab. And I am going to, you know, I like doing everything with a mirror modifier. So I'm just going to press Control R here, Control R here, divide that into, you know, I'm going to, let's just, sorry, I'm thinking about how to do this. Yeah. So I'm going to divide the center here. And now I'm just deleting everything but this top corner. And we're going to use the mirror modifier to make it a complete object just from that top corner. I'm pressing B to select all of these sides, deleting them. And you see we just have this little bit on the side now. Now I'm going over to this wrench. I'm saying add modifier, mirror, and then I'm doing this one on X, Y, and Z. So when I move this vertex, you see it moves all of the sides here. Pressing Control Z to get out of that. And I'm turning on clipping. If I leave clipping off, you see I can just pull this area out. But if I turn it on, the center is set in place. So then I'm just going to make the floor and the ceiling. So what I'm doing is pressing Control R for a loop cut, moving up here. I'm deleting this side, and then I'm pressing E for extrude, and then pulling that vertex I extruded over here. And sorry if I'm flying through the modeling stuff a little bit quickly, but what I really want to get to here is just how to make a room that can tile. So I'm hoping this will be useful, even if like the modeling, you might need some more practice with the modeling tools to get this little room going. So now let's say this is the floor and the ceiling. So what we're going to need now is some walls for this room, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to Shift D to duplicate this room. And now we're in the duplicate of this. So I'm going to drag this down, and you see we have this other object inside of here, and this is going to be the walls. So I'm going to move this up here so it's just touching this top one. I pressed Control to snap this in place. And going into, I'm going to select all of this and press M to move it to another layer. And that's just going to let us see this little object here. So then let me think. Yeah, I'm going to press K for a cut over here, and cut over here. I'm just making a little wedge of a wall that's going to be really easy for us to tile as much as we want to place on the edges of this room. So now I'm pressing K for cut here, moving this over here, and oh, let me see. I'm probably not doing this as efficiently as I could, but going to the side view, pressing K, drag it over here, pressing C to constrain it to one axis. And we've got a cut there. So now I'm just cutting to here. Hang on. And I didn't rehearse this ahead of time, so apologies for the fumbling. And then doing the same thing over here. All right, and one final cut here. And all we're interested in is one section of this wall, so I'm going to delete all of this stuff and delete this, turn Z back on, and now you see we just have this little wedge of a wall. And let's see that other layer again and see how this is lining up with this. So we're going to need to fill this in and fill this in. This top of it is going to be against the ceiling, so we're not seeing that at all. And let's just make a solid wall to start with. So I am pulling this down, meeting it up. And you can see that there's no face on top or bottom. We just have this little narrow tube here. And let's look at how this looks with our room. So I'm going to turn off part of this mirror modifier. And you can see we just have this little wall here. So then if we want to make a full room with that, what we're going to do is we're going to just save these into Unity as their own objects. So we got one object for the wall and one object for the floor and ceiling. And then in Unity, if you want a full room with no exits, you just duplicate this wall and copy it. Sorry, make 4 copies of it. So let's just see what that looks like real fast. Duplicate this, put it here, duplicate it, rotate Z 90, and we've basically got a cube here with a hollow inside. Now, a dungeon, it's not just composed of solid rooms you can't get in and out of, right? A dungeon is composed of walls and entrances. So I'm going to make one more kind of wall here. And, let me see. I'm just going to delete all these extra walls. So we've just got our one. And I'm keeping all these on separate layers. So I've got floor and ceiling, closed wall. Now I'm pressing Shift D to make a duplicate of this and moving it to layer 3. Go over to layer 3. It's the same thing, but this time I would like a wall with a door in it. So I'm just going to apply this, I'm going to apply this mirror modifier because I really only want left-right symmetry on this one. And like I said, I'm kind of flying through this modeling stuff because I want to get at the bigger how to make pieces for a procedural dungeon question. So I'm just going to make a little door here. And again, keeping it super... Oh, and I need to do this on the other side too. Keeping it super simple here. So we'll just make a rectangular entrance here. And we'll need these walls on here. So that's about as simple as we can get for the door. And you can see this just fits right in here. Maybe I'll move this a little so it's more flush with this. And we can, let's see how this looks with a dungeon. So, move this over, rotate Z 90, and you can see that anywhere in this room we can either place this object for a wall or this object for an entrance. And then if we want another room, and we're going to be laying this out in code in Unity because we're talking about a procedurally generated dungeon, right? But then we'd duplicate all of this, and we'd place it so that each entrance is placed against another entrance in this dungeon. And I hope you can start to see how these can all kind of fit together and make a more complicated dungeon space. And You can add other things that are a little more complicated than just walls and entrances. Like you can make hallways or stairways, all kinds of stuff. So now, let me just rotate this back. I think I messed up our model a little. All right, so I want to rotate C -90. And there we go. So now I'm just going to texture all of these objects. And yeah, for the purposes of demonstration, let's just keep this over here. So I'm going to go through each of these layers and do what I was doing with that cube. So for this one, I'm going to say image, or actually we've already opened this, but I'm going to say image, open image, select your texture, and then, let me see. So I think I'm just going to go with the simple UV unwrap for this. So I'm going to say U unwrap. And you can see this is going a little weird. So let's try U Smart UV Unwrap. And that's looking significantly better. Again, this texture doesn't work very well as a ceiling. So I'm just going to select all of this and let's just scale it way down until this is about as big as we want it. And I also want these sides going horizontally. So I'm going to say rotate 90 on this. Press G for grab and move this around. And maybe press S for scale until I've got just the number of these showing that I want. Then maybe grab this, line it up a bit, and yeah, and this is something that you can really spend a whole lot of time getting right. And I also want my highlight on top, so I'm going to select these and say rotate 180. And yeah, that's, that's starting to look right. We do that. And I think that would look halfway decent with a good ceiling and floor texture. Then look down here, and yeah, that's pretty good. So, now we're going to want the texture on these as well. So I'm actually, I just want to do one of these at a time. So I'm selecting this, and, I'm going to go ahead and apply this mirror modifier and delete these edges that I don't need. All right, and now I'm going to do the same thing, use Smart UV Project, and I'm going to go over here, and the image is already in our file. So I don't really need to say image, open image for this. I can just click here. The image is already here. And then, the UV Unwrap with Smart UV Project really wasn't too bad for this one, so I'm just going to go with that. I'm selecting all of this with A, and again, I want horizontal blocks with this highlight on top. So let's try rotate 90. I'm pressing R90. That's upside down, so R and then 180. And then that's pretty good, so I'm just going to press S for scale over here, move this up, and try to get it lining up with this other texture on top. not worrying too much about this. And yeah, and it looks like I actually went quite a bit smaller with the bricks on my top. But I don't know if that's actually an issue here. Like, variable scale is kind of nice here. You can go with smaller bricks and larger bricks. And, you know, the way these are lining up, it looks like Smart UV Project actually didn't do a great job with this. So I'm going to say U and then, no, that's worse. Let's actually mark a seam and try that. So select this again, U, unwrap, and now that's actually lined up way, way better. And the way I did that was I selected this edge. I said Control E for the edge menu. And you can also do mesh down here and go to edges. And then I went up here and I said mark seam. And that's again what I was talking about with the little Santa candy, where you're just marking out where the edges of that are. And then pulling this out into a flat ribbon. So let's look at this one by one. So we've got this edge is here on the UV map. This face is right here on it. Then it's got this over here. And finally the back is right here. So, like when we rotate all the way around this seems to be tiling very nicely. And now for this final door, I'm going to try to do that same thing. So, marking the seam worked best for that other one. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here as well. I'm just selecting this, Control E, mark seam. And I think we're going to need probably a few more seams here because this doorway is a little more complex geometrically. So let me just think about this for a moment. So I'm going to move this edge around so it's nice and flush. And then if we're just thinking about how this unwraps, I believe if I is thinking about how to flatten this out, like this piece comes around here, and then this comes down up here, and I believe this is enough seams. Let's find out. So then I'm selecting all of this, I'm pressing A to select it all, pressing U for UV unwrap, and saying unwrap, and let's see what we came up with. So again, this always looks worse at the seams. So, I'm actually going to move around these seams a little. And like I said, I don't deal a whole lot with texturing stuff, so take everything I say here with a grain of salt. And instead, I'm going to say this inner part is seamed off from the outer part. And I believe this should work. Let's find out. So I'm going to mark a seam again. And let's try UV unwrap again. You can see it looks better from the inside. Going around here, the bricks seem to be lining up well. And again, we have this issue with this ceiling needing another ceiling texture. But these bricks are actually wrapping around the sides pretty nicely right now. So let's look at it with these other layers. And I'm just going to need to scale this so it's the same size as this other one. And it looks like the highlight's already in the right place here on the top. So that's good. And I'm just going to move this around, pressing G to grab it until it lines up. And like I said, this, you can spend a lot of time really perfecting all of this, but I think just for a quick demonstration, this looks pretty good. So now I'm going to finish off by just showing what this looks like, tiling all of this out. But first I'm going to save, actually. I haven't saved this whole time. Usually I save constantly. So I'm just going to say den tile. And I'm going to make this file available on the Discord if you want to have a look at it. So now let's just finish off by showing what this is going to look like in action. So let's go ahead, move all this over here. And like I said, you just want to copy these 3 pieces into Unity and have it generating this thing in code, where you're deciding in code whether you want to put this entrance piece in or a wall in. So now let's rotate Z90, whoops, duplicate, rotate Z90, and let's just do a really simple dungeon. So duplicate, rotate Z-90. So you can see this is a nice little chunk to make a dungeon out of. Here's what it looks like inside. Now I'm selecting all of this, duplicate, move it over, rotate Z-90, and I'm always facing these entrance pieces to each other. And the way I've set it up, you do get a little texture trapped in the wall where you can't see it. So there are ways to set up these walls that are a little more efficient, where, you know, each room doesn't need to be generating its own wall object. But you know, I figured this is a good way to start visualizing what this workflow looks like. And then grab one more of these because I'm having fun with this. Duplicate, move it over. Now let's rotate Z180, snap it in place, and have a little look in here. So now we're walking around our tiled, procedurally laid out dungeon. And I think this would be a really good start to making something the player could explore that you could generate in code. So yeah, and just let me know if you have any questions, and I hope this is helpful for you.